Welcome to the live stream. We are now live with the absolute worst case scenario. I guess not worst case, I shouldn't say that, but pretty
We
close
don't
to
have
it.
nukes yet. We don't have
Yeah.
nukes yet.
But as of yesterday, yes, because today's the 25th. Yesterday in the early morning, technically it's tomorrow in Ukraine, based off of U.S. time, because the United States is obviously the center of everything.
It is also today in Ukraine for me.
Yeah. Oh, yes, because you live in Kiwi
Oh wait,
land.
unless it's a whole day behind, so it's like the day before yesterday.
Anyway,
I don't
so
fucking know.
in the early morning of September 24th, Russian troops crossed the Ukrainian border into Ukraine. We had discussed this in a couple of tone deaf live streams before, and we're going to talk about it today and just sort of give a rundown for anyone who's out of the loop. I've been stuck to a lot of the different news feeds like a crack addict, while I've also been trying to study for a pretty big test I have coming up. So I'm going to continue studying during the live stream, but I will be active. But Kiwi, you have a small background in international relations since that's what you're studying in college, right?
Yeah, some degree, I suppose.
So
not quite a qualification, but
I mean, it's pretty close. It's better than what I have. I mean, Diabeto knows that both of us are just faking it till we make it. We learned that in speech and debate. So
you think I'm not?
It's true, but you talk to someone who actually goes on the news and talks about state policy. That's your professor. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
So
it's true. I mean, I've talked to him. I haven't talked to him about this because I haven't seen him yet. Because the uni year doesn't start until next week.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, and I'm probably not going to see him for a while, to be honest.
He's probably pretty busy.
Yeah, and I've got other politics papers that don't have him. So
yeah. Hang on, I'm trying to. My mouse has decided to disappear, which is lovely. There we go.
Beautiful.
Anyway, so yeah, there's been a lot of stuff going on with just absolute wild misinformation from both sides, especially Russia, with the amount of like claims that they have. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of the strategy on their part.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of people who are trying to put like everything into perspective with the Ukrainian stuff and talking about how all their claims about their claims when it came to numbers that they claim that they've killed in terms of the air kills, the tank kills, the ground troop kills, and there is legitimacy to the critiques of those of those claims, especially considering that Ukraine on the first day claimed about 15 Russian aircraft shot down. I forget what Ukraine said their losses were. I think it was like a couple of aircraft shot on the ground and like one shot down in the air. But it's interesting to watch, and like we aren't going to know the true numbers for a while. I mean, we're still learning about casualty rates from World War II and World War I. So we're not going to know for quite a while what these numbers actually are. But
we'll get a ballpark
right
within the next few months.
The important thing is like Russia stopped with their mass propaganda. Like, I shouldn't say stop with their mass propaganda. What I mean by that is when the invasion first started, Russia was very big on showing what they were doing. They had a lot of videos coming out of Russia where they were showing the invasion like as some big success. Like, look at us, we're dropping paratroopers, we got this going on. And then videos were coming out of Ukraine of helicopters getting shot down, of Russians getting captured, and the videos coming from Russia stopped, and they have not resumed. Russia's only claimed on paper that day one was a success, and they've only claimed on paper that day two was a success. And to some degree they have had some successes, but most of the ground that they've captured is pretty worthless. Who knows the long-lasting effects of what they did in Chernobyl, because we can't have nice things, and this is the worst timeline. So, yeah. I haven't I haven't seen anything come out of confirmation or not if they actually did shoot down the paratrooper transport.
I've seen a
Yeah,
couple reporting on it, so
What was
I
that?
haven't seen anything on that, so I don't know.
What'd you say?
I've seen a couple people reporting on it, but no hard confirmation.
Yeah. The problem is Russia isn't going to admit to anything. Um, Russia yesterday did not admit to any losses. I think they said that they had like one plane shot down, and that is certifiably false. There's at least 3 videos of aircraft getting shot down from yesterday. They admitted to like 3 helicopters getting shot down. There are several videos of helicopters getting shot down. It is much more than that. So there's definitely some pretty bad like denying coming in from Russia. But
Also, just the amount of stuff that they're like they have videos and footage of that they're not showing. Because I've seen just today, I was watching a chronological series of videos that someone put together,
yeah,
and there were at least like probably 3 separate Russian convoys included in that footage that you could tell were like distinctly separate convoys that were destroyed in the video. And it included like armored trucks, armored, tanks, stuff like that, transport, logistics vehicles, which just those and seeing some of them had like the bodies in them and stuff
yeah,
is already way more than they've admitted to.
yeah. Especially with the amount that has already been confirmed as captured. So it's definitely become a situation where Russia's losing a lot more than they expected. And I was talking to you, Kiwi, about it earlier, and I mean, our group chat that we have, Diabeto, we've been discussing it, where Russia is nowhere near at the position of strength that they thought they would be today.
Yeah,
No.
for sure.
It's basically that Putin has been working on bad information, going in with far too much confidence.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Especially with that.
There's a little circle of yes men and stuff.
Yeah. Especially with that failed infiltration that they tried yesterday at that airport with the paratroopers, and how everyone got killed, captured, or
with Zelensky or something.
yeah. I'm pretty sure the original plan was launch the invasion in the regions that they did, which, funnily enough, the image that I have as the thumbnail and as the background to this video are the plans that Britain released as sort of the, hey, this is what Russia's plans are. We found them. And this was days before the invasion. And everyone was laughing at it, especially Russia. Well, that's exactly that. Those plans are exactly what Russia has done. The attack from Chernobyl to I don't know how to pronounce words in Slavic languages, so for those who do, forgive my great sin that I'm about to commit.
Town.
Yeah. So the assault from Belarus through Chernobyl and into Zhytomyr. Zhytomyr. Thank you.
Yeah, like Shitomir, but with the
that has obviously been more diverted towards Kiev because I think Kiev ended up being more difficult than they thought it would be, especially with the idea that maybe they were expecting to have men infiltrate the government, kill Zelensky, and install a puppet government to where the rest of the invasion would merely be mopping up and securing land for their new, nation state.
puppet government.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the invasion towards Kiev from the area around Klintsy, that's kind of stalled out. That hasn't gained a lot of land. They've reached Chernihiv.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, they've reached that, but they're just on the outskirts of the city, and they're not really able to make a breakthrough. The assault towards Poltava has been also stalled, and the assault towards Kharkiv has also stalled and is on the outskirts of the city. The assaults out of the Donbass region haven't gone anywhere, and in fact, the Ukrainians counterattacked at...
They push them back across the border?
They pushed them back at Luhansk, and they pushed the Russians back across the Russian border, and the separatist region is back at where it was before the invasion. So Russia's gotten nowhere there. The assaults out of Crimea have taken some ground, and there are a couple critical cities that have been taken there, but nothing that was expected to be held by Ukraine. It's one of those they're bending, they're not breaking. They did launch a naval assault at Odessa, and that completely failed. So basically, end of day 2, start of day 3, Ukraine holds the critical spots and has forced Russia into the situation where Russia has to focus on something. We were discussing this in one of our previous live streams where because Ukraine has these interior lines of defense, similar to how obviously Ukraine is not the same as the Confederacy. I'm merely using this for a strategic comparison. The Confederacy used strategic lines, the interior lines of defense, in order to defeat the Union at the Battle of Chickamauga Creek. The forces under Bragg were heavily outnumbered, and Longstreet was able to get enough reinforcements from Lee's army, traveled by train to Chickamauga, and they were able to basically appear at the last second and defeat Rosecrans' army. Now, part of that was due to Rosecrans having a mistake, but that's another story. What I'm saying here is that Russia's total forces do outnumber Ukraine's, but Ukraine can easily move troops around to where they need them on the battlefronts. Russia can't. So Russia has to choose a section to attack, and they have to focus on that because they don't have the infrastructure to just be moving troops around. There's already a ton of rumors that the Russian troops are already suffering from lack of supplies. There are rumors of the troops in Belarus not having enough supplies, and there's captured Russian soldiers who have only had 3 magazines on them with their gun, and no, like, grenades or anything. So whether that portion with the captured Russian soldiers is Ukrainian propaganda to say the enemy is low on ammunition, we can do this, or if that's legitimate, there are rumors coming from Russia and from occupied Ukraine that these soldiers have nothing, that they are low on food, they are low on supplies.
Mainly a conscript army as well.
Right.
Like, I remember I was reading something today that many of the troops thought that this was an exercise, that they weren't even planning on going in. But, like, they just thought this was an extension to the exercises that we're doing in the week before.
Right.
And yet somehow there's people shooting back.
Exactly. There was a few captured people, and people are speculative of, like, what they're saying true, or have they just been told to say this? And there's been captured people who have basically translating what they said is basically, we were told we were just on an extra exercise, and then we found ourselves in Ukraine. Like, we were not told that this was an invasion.
Sound kind of
like,
suspicious.
Right, like, because Russia used that whole argument back in 2014, like, oh, whoops, we keep getting lost and finding ourselves in Ukraine. But these are just the regular soldiers, and they're like, we don't know what's going on. Like, we thought we were still in Belarus. And then suddenly we're getting shot at. Like, we had no idea there was a war going on. So I think that some troops might not have been informed, but you can't conduct a war like that. Otherwise, your military isn't going to actually
fight. It seems like this is a hasty decision.
I've also heard from some of there's been a lot of reports of, like, that reconnaissance platoon that surrendered, or whatever that surrendered. That a lot of them have been, like, told they were going in, the ones that knew they were going into a war, were told that they were going in directly against, like, fanatical fascist forces out of Ukraine.
Right, that's sort of been the whole,
line.
focal point, yeah.
Well, yeah, and then, so they were told
and that's been the Russian line for 10 years now.
And then they kind of found out once they got into it that, you know, the whole Ukrainians and Russians kind of see each other very similarly anyways, it seems.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of relations on both sides.
Nazis.
All right, so real quick, before we move on, I do want to touch up on the Ghost of Kiev, because that is an interesting subject I'd like to touch on, especially regarding how legends of war get started. So this is a good thing to talk about with historical context. So the Ghost of Kiev is a term coined by a War Thunder gamer in Scotland. So this is, like, the Ghost of Kiev name was not something created by the Ukrainian government. Now, whether or not this pilot exists or not is up for debate, because Ukraine has claimed over 15 aircraft shot down, including one massive aircraft. I forget the name. It's an IL 4-engine troop transport that was set up for parachute dropping, and apparently over 100 Russian soldiers are dead from it. So, yeah. Anyway, so the Ukrainian Air Force is kicking butt. Like, there are plenty of examples of these Russian jets getting shot down. There are several videos out there of very short clips from the ground's perspective of Ukrainian fighters maneuvering around Russian fighters. So they are dogfighting, not in the traditional World War II sense, but in the modern sense.
The long distance dogfight sort of stuff that you see
Right.
now.
So there is a good chance that there is a pilot within the Ukrainian Air Force who is already an ace. There's a really good chance of that, especially since Ukraine has seemed to employ an almost guerrilla-style warfare tactic with their Air Force, where they have their Air Force planted at probably very small air bases with just enough material to support those aircraft, and they send one or two up at a time into these massively saturated areas with a ton of Russian aircraft. They shoot down a couple because their aircraft all look the same, so they confuse them, and then they get the heck out of there, land, refuel, and do it again. So could there be a pilot who has as many kills as has been attributed to the Ghost of Kiev? Sure. But is it who we've seen? Probably not. Are those videos even Ukrainian aircraft? I have no idea. Is it those specific aircraft? I don't know. But there's nuggets of truth and stuff. So there are Ukrainian pilots with multiple kills, at least one. And the Ghost of Kiev is a name that's sort of been attributed to one that may or may not exist. And at this point, it's more or less just an umbrella term for the pilots themselves. And at the end of this conflict, if a pilot in Ukraine has become an ace, he's going to get that title, especially if he was fighting around Kiev. So while it is true that it's semi-been debunked, it also hasn't, simply because there are Ukrainian fighter pilots with multiple kills, and one of them has to have been recorded around Kiev and has been the focal point of this Ghost of Kiev story. So we'll just be learning more and more and more. We have a lot of fog of war right now. So
But yeah, that's the big thing, is that we just don't know.
right.
We don't know fucking anything.
Now
There's so much information that to pass through it to actually find a concrete fact is impossible at this moment. With a war that's 3 days old.
Exactly.
In the modern era as well, with intentional disinformation.
Exactly. There's so much intentional disinformation right now. Now, there's a big issue, too. Like, Ukraine hasn't exactly claimed to have, shot down another aircraft with one of their own aircraft. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry hasn't done that until today. Obviously, we've seen videos of Ukrainian and Russian aircraft within the same frame on a camera. So they have been within, visible distance to each other. But the important thing is, like, Ukraine hasn't claimed to have shot down any aircraft by another aircraft until this. Let me look up the name of the airplane so I don't keep being an idiot. The IL-76. They claim to have shot down one of those. And the big thing is, like, that was, like, I think the first airplane that the Ukrainians have claimed to have shot down by another aircraft. I believe, if I recall correctly, that the aircraft that got shot down over Kiev last night, which was neither confirmed nor denied to have been Ukrainian or Russian, although pictures show Russian camouflage, but people are claiming that that's just how Ukraine paints their canopies and they use the typical digital everywhere else. I have no clue. There's so much disinformation about it, and we may never know. But this is like, if this is confirmed, this is the first confirmed aircraft shot down by another Ukrainian airplane. However, there are reports of, Russian aircraft getting shot down by Ukrainian ones, and so with the Ghost of Kiev, it's definitely possible that that exists, that there's a pilot with multiple kills. So whenever I see people saying, "Oh, it's propaganda, it doesn't exist," no,
it could be, but we don't know.
Right, like, there are so many Russian airplanes that have gotten shot down that there's bound to be one or two pilots with multiple kills, and that's who we're talking about. People just adding on the kills to them and just throwing every aircraft shot down onto that, that's just going to be part and parcel with legends. That's what happens in warfare.
That's how aces are born.
Right.
Fucking
like,
or whatever.
People are out here acting like, all the other aces in history have 100% accurate information about them or 90% accurate information about them, and they aren't these legends spawned from war. The people trying to, like, discount this and, like, act like, oh, it's all propaganda, there's not a single pilot that would ever fit this description within Ukraine. I mean, stop being these epic intellectuals who think you're just smart because you didn't fall for it. No one's falling for this. Everyone understands that this is just part and parcel. You know, like you're not some intellectual. You're just a freaking weirdo. That's the best way to
If
put it.
you take it at face value, but you're also fucking stupid if you call everything a goddamn psyop.
Apparently, Ukraine's claiming they took down another of the big Aleutian planes.
Oh, they saying that they took down 2 of them today.
Yeah. Granted, this again, no confirmation. This is the first tweet I've seen about it, and it's Twitter, so you know.
Yeah. Fuck's sake, I hate the goddamn Telegraph. The Telegraph is claiming that the Kremlin forces are going to storm Kiev tonight, so we'll see about that.
About 150 transport helicopters and ground forces about 32 kilometers from the border of Ukraine and southern Belarus, according to satellite imagery.
Yeah, on the first day there was a Russian aircraft carrying like 50 people that crashed, and apparently the crew died, but no mention of the passengers. So, in fact, there's rumors that it was just a cargo airplane and only 10 people died, but it still crashed during military operations, and is a technical casualty of war. So.
Yeah, fine.
So. Yeah, it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to see what continues to happen with 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 this whole situation. Like, I'm gonna be disconnected for the next few days just due to everything going on. So I'm gonna just very quickly get out of the loop. But
Yeah,
right now, it's kind of why I've been focusing on it so much, because like it's such a big event. There's nothing that's been like this in my lifetime, and I'm just trying to keep up with it. Like the last time a major power invaded a neighboring secondary power, it was Russia invading Finland in 1939. So, at least from what I've been able to find, like I'm talking about like a secondary power, not just Russia invading Georgia or one of those types of things. Like legitimate warfare threatening the sovereignty of the state.
and not just great power to great power as well.
Right.
Like with the Nazis going into Russia.
Exactly.
The years after. I see what you mean. Actually, that's an interesting thing I thought about.
Yeah, and something like this. What?
There's footage coming in now that some of the metro areas in Kiev are experiencing explosions in actual combat. So they might be storming tonight to try and break resolve.
Oh, they were doing that yesterday too.
This is a siege.
Dude,
they're trying to. Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy because the Ukrainian radio stations and everything were basically talking about how to make a Molotov cocktail.
They're gonna have it's been kind of a nightmare for Russia up to this point, just getting to Kiev with the unexpected holdback. Trying to take that fucking city at this point is gonna be an absolute nightmare, because I've been seeing footage of them like you said, like making Molotovs en masse and like handing out assault rifles. One of their former presidents is there basically with a impromptu militia that formed yesterday morning, and they already have 2 heavy machine guns and a couple not a whole lot of weaponry, but some substantial armament for 2 days of trying. And as they move into Kiev, it's gonna be fucking.
According to Ukrainian sources and backed up by journalists on the ground, so take that how you will. I'm just reporting what I read. 10,000 assault rifles have been handed out to civilians.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
On top of that, so there's a guy I follow on Instagram who his account is basically him basically detailing his perspective in Ukraine. He's a British Special Forces veteran who then volunteered for the Ukrainian Marines, and he's documented his time in Ukraine. He currently doesn't run the account. A friend of his in Kiev now operates the account, while this dude is currently fighting in the Ukrainian Marines against Russia. His unit was moved back to Lviv to assist in getting people out of Ukraine, and he didn't mention it, but I'm pretty sure because Poland sent that massive convoy into Lviv of armament and of guns and of anti-tank weapons and anti-air weapons and ammunition and supplies. I'm pretty sure they're going there real quick, and they might be reorganizing and accepting, foreign volunteers there before heading back to Kiev, to basically assist from the outside in bogging down Russian troops and possibly breaking through any encirclement that might happen.
That's
Because
another interesting thing, is volunteer troops in Ukraine. How, do you think that's going to become a big deal in the coming weeks and months of...
if Ukraine
people...
lasts that long, yes.
I think they will. I think the thing is that
yeah.
Ukraine, I see this becoming an insurgent war.
I think that you'll see a lot of
the
people
same
going to
line.
Ukraine to fight against Russia. There's only
Yeah.
two nations that really support Russia that won't go off and basically blatantly call them bad, and that's India and Belarus. China's even basically
also
come out and call
China,
well,
which is
China's
China,
condemned
yeah.
the invasion, but they won't sanction Russia.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
China's
they're
obviously
doing diplomatic notes.
China is obviously playing both sides here, trying to stay on good terms
Of
with
course.
Russia by not sanctioning them, while at the same time keeping good terms with America by saying, yeah, no, we think it's bad. So, yeah.
It's a sensible play on diplomatic play on their part.
So I'm also watching the live stream at Kiev, and I'll go ahead and update the video with that link so that anyone who's interested can go ahead and check out the live stream in Kiev right now. There is, every once in a while sounds of explosions, some sounds of yelling. So I've been watching it a couple times just to try to keep up with what's going on and stay informed and whatnot. I honestly this whole situation sucks, and it's it's just interesting to watch from, just to think I'm watching this from the comfort of my home here in the States, and just sort of sitting there watching this and keeping up with this as if it's a game. It's really weird and it feels really morbid to do that, but at the same time, I feel like it's important to be informed about this, and I am trying to make a difference where I can. There is, and I will try to put this link in the description of the video if I can remember to. There is a lot of charities that you can donate to help out with the Ukrainian cause. There's a lot of different charities. If you live in Europe, there's a lot of humanitarian groups that you can volunteer with. If you live in America, apparently America just opened up its borders to refugees from Ukraine, so I'm sure those will become available soon too. So, there's a lot of ways that people are going to be able to help soon, and I think that the foreign volunteers within Europe are only just going to increase. Now, one thing that's interesting is Serbia just said that they're going to sanction any citizens who go to fight in Ukraine for the Ukrainians. So Serbia is just once again proving themselves to be Russia's puppet. Who would have thought?
Well, that's amazing. Think back to the fucking start of the First World War.
Yeah, honestly.
Pan-Slavism is back at it again.
Frickin' Serbs, dude.
But, well, no, actually, it kind of fits in with Russian domestic sort of ideological rhetoric of, great Russian, great Eurasian civilization, Brotherhood of Slavs, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Sort of fits.
Brotherhood of Slavs until it's the Ukrainians. So.
Brett, two asides here I have. There's a tweet from some guy who is a sci-fi writer. I don't know anything else about him, just from looking at his Twitter page. Patrick Tomlinson.
I've heard the name, but yeah, I don't know. Go on.
So apparently, go ahead. Sorry.
He has a tweet. Fun fact: Ukraine. A water balloon filled with $1 of paint thrown at the periscopes can disable a tank as fast as a $150,000 javelin missile. Please do have fun. And I just yes, that is true, but this kind of goes back to your, everyone else sitting in an armchair, reading about this. Yeah, it's fine sitting in your armchair, if I fill this balloon with paint and throw it at the viewport of a tank, they won't be able to see me.
Yeah.
But you're not. I don't know. I feel like we're greatly. It's got to be more difficult to get near a tank than that, and especially even if you could just theoretically run up to one and not be, gunned down.
Yeah.
That's scary as shit. I'm not. if there's tanks outside, like I'm not gonna be fucking going out there with paint balloons and being like, "Oh guys, look, I have a homemade javelin."
Yeah. There's another problem with that too. Um, and that comes down to the fact that doing that to the periscope only matters if the crew is buttoned up. If the crew decides to open their hatch and take a peek outside, what the heck are you gonna do? Throw it at their face? Like that only
Well, yeah.
matters if it's buttoned up. So it doesn't even work in practice. Just get a Molotov cocktail, throw it at the vents, and there you go, Winter War style. But again, you have to get close to the tank. And Russia learned over 70 years ago, over like 80 years ago, that leaving tanks without infantry support is a death sentence. So the thing that's going to happen is that these Ukrainian citizens are building up their Molotov cocktail stash. They're going to do what Budapest did back in the mid-century, and they're going to throw these Molotov cocktails from the buildings onto the vehicles below to take them out. That's what's going to happen if it comes down to that. You're not going to get close to a tank anymore because the infantry are going to support it, and they're not going to deal with partitions well. They can shoot at partitions. That is not a war crime. What is a war crime is bombing civilian homes, which they've done.
Well, yeah, they've already passed that point.
Also, I'm going to go ahead and add Alfonso to this. Also, he did send me a link with, so apparently a journalist in Ukraine talked to one of the ex-presidents, the dude who's been walking around with a Kalashnikov, the frickin' hella cool ex-president of Ukraine. Klinsky's got some balls of steel, and this guy's also hella awesome. But he basically said that, yeah, the Ghost of Kiev is real. And here's a picture of the dude. Take that how you will. Feel free. If you don't believe it, you are entitled to your opinion, and I don't blame you. There is a lot of misinformation going around. So
I'm here now.
So there you go. That's apparently from Ukrainian ex-president. That is the Ghost of Kiev.
Hi.
You know, take that how you will, but there you go.
All right, so I'm here now. So hello, everyone.
Hello.
Interesting.
This has been a topic of very much heated debate in my classrooms all day today.
Apparently, I've just seen something that the Kazakhs have declined Russia's invitation to join the war in Ukraine.
It's amazing. Can't wait for them to get purged.
Micronesia completely cut diplomatic ties as well for, what it's worth. I'm not sure Micronesia is going to hold much sway, but hey, kudos to them.
Hey, the United States Holocaust Museum.
That's like Mexico declaring war on Germany during World War II.
So, yeah, the U.S. Holocaust Museum condemned the invasion, so I'm expecting Russia to turn back and go home any day now.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, yeah, you can't stand against the Holocaust Museum.
No, the U.S.
Yeah,
no, not just any Holocaust. The U.S. Holocaust Museum. They condemned it.
Who's gonna argue with a museum about something that didn't happen?
Yeah, exactly, and especially one that was led by neo-Nazis.
God, I feel bad for even laughing.
So the Serbian government, they not only sure they can state all day long that they don't support the invasion and that they respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. And I understand a small nation like Serbia not sanctioning Russia. First of all, Serbia not sanctioning Russia isn't going to do anything. Like, Serbia sanctioning Russia doesn't do anything. Serbia not sanctioning Russia, it doesn't do anything. It's like Bulgaria saying, if your airplane's registered in Russia or your flight originated in Russia, you can't land here. Oh, great. Who the heck is going to Bulgaria anyway? Like, that's not going to hurt anyone. Like, great job. You guys are making your statement. That's awesome. You're supporting Ukraine. But what is it actually doing? So Serbia not sanctioning Russia isn't doing anything. They're just trying to protect their own interests because they require Russia for a lot of their own internal mechanisms. The problem comes with Serbia saying that they will sanction their own citizens if they go to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine. That's where the problem comes in. Punishing people trying to volunteer to protect Ukrainian sovereignty. Serbia can go off and say all day long that, hey, we support Ukraine, but for our own national interests, in order for us not to completely collapse in on ourselves, because Serbia isn't exactly the most stable country in the Balkans, they never have been, for them to be self-sufficient, they have to keep on semi-good relations with Russia. But they don't have to go so far as to sanction their own citizens for trying to volunteer with Ukraine. That's where it gets to a point where I'm like, what the heck are you guys doing? So I understand most of what Serbia is doing. I understand where what a lot of these minor powers are doing when it comes to how they're dealing with Russia, because Russia is a source for a lot of these nations' stability. That makes sense. That's spheres of influence. That's how that works. That's politics. But sanctioning your own citizens from volunteering for Ukraine is a bit far, in my opinion, because you can easily just have plausible deniability of, oh no, we can't control our own citizens. Remember Russia, we're both fighting for freedom, because that's Russia's whole thing, is that they're saying we're fighting against neo-Nazis and genocidal maniacs. So even though Ukraine has freedom of speech and actual democracy and a leader who's willing to fight for his people, so take that how you will. But it is nice to get an opinion from Serbia when we're sitting here talking smack. It's not good to fall into an echo chamber. So
I was gonna mention, I have friends who live in Romania. Don't ask why.
The other thing is that the small nations, like me and New Zealand, is that it's more the showing of support. I mean, I'm not saying we're on the same page as fucking Serbia. We're on the opposite side. But if enough small nations come together and be like, stop, don't do this, fuck off, get out of Ukraine, they're gonna have to take notice.
Yeah.
It's the concept of what was it? I can't remember the fucking name of it, but small state diplomacy or middling power diplomacy.
Yeah.
There's a Twitter account that says it's based in. I've mainly been using Twitter for updates because it's faster than everything else. So it says it's based in Kiev, and it has a lot of tweets I've seen corroborated of the time they've been posting. According to them, they just attacked an army base in Kiev, but the attack was repelled. And then about 10 to 15 minutes ago, there was a large movement on a Victory Avenue in Kiev City, but it was also repulsed by Ukrainian forces. Now, neither of those has been corroborated, but,
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's gonna happen the other 2 days or whatever, how there was just small attacks that kept getting repelled, at the airport. I was hearing shit out of the airport that there was a bunch of smaller assaults that were maybe led by platoon-sized units, and we're just getting repulsed every time. It wasn't until an actual mass force came in that they actually captured it and then lost it, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And then, I was saying, I have friends who are in Romania, which is right next to them, and and also Norway as well. The Norwegians are scared out of their mind. He's literally building a nuclear bunker, of course, because he just has one. And then my friends in Romania were like, we are worried about this, but it's not. We feel comfortable being protected by NATO. They also don't at the same time, because if they know if they get invaded, Russia has a head start. They have the leg ahead if they do invade for whatever. Say Ukraine falls, and then Romania is next on the docket of the list or whatever that Putin has in his head of former Soviet territories he wants back.
Yeah.
They're gonna be the next domino, and they can only do so much with NATO. NATO, if say Romania is attacked, NATO's gonna take a while, not a while of course, but it's gonna take them a minute to actually get mass forces in Romania to defend them. That is gonna be mainly left to the Romanian forces to defend themselves for long enough. If Ukraine falls in a short amount of time, why can't Romania or why can't Poland? There's other nations that are similar strength and weaknesses to Ukraine. And he has military friends over there. They have saying how the units there have been getting ready to go to Ukraine, up in just basically leaving and going to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine, because they know hey, if we don't defend Ukraine, we're probably next to the docket. They are it's not just it's just not just Romanian troops, it's Polish units, it's other nearby countries like Croatia that have military members who are willing to go over to Ukraine, hey, don't stop them here at Ukraine, we lose our buffer state of having Ukraine here if they want to that's their safety net, is they have, other than the sea of course, they have Ukraine right there protecting them. If Russia wants to invade, they can't because of Ukraine. And if they claim that, then what's them from being next and getting shelled to high hell?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of fear within a lot of the different smaller nations they're worried that, holy crap, if Putin is actually willing to go to war with a neighboring state, like where does that stop? Where does he stop with that? Because
Right.
like everyone assumed, and I was really hopeful that this would be the case, but there were so many people assuming that he just wanted to go to the Donbass region and get those breakaway states and just basically give them that sense of stability and hope that those separatists, on their own volition, it may be just, oh no, these conscripts, their terms are up and now they're joining the separatists. It's because they're supporting their fellow Russians. And suddenly the separatists get a bunch more men and then they are able to take land. Like, that was what everyone's assumption was, not this.
A full-scale invasion.
We talked about it as being the most likely scenario just based off what we were seeing and everything, but it was still one of those things like, more than likely, he's just going to stop here. So now everyone's like, holy crap, he could probably go even further. And so you have people like Finland. I mean, I think this is it. I think that he just wants Ukraine, and honestly, it could very much end with a complete upheaval of the current Russian government if this keeps getting worse and the Russian people keep getting angrier.
Because
and the thing that really struck me was the fact that day dot massive anti-war protests in Russia. From the first
St. Petersburg and somewhere else as well, right? There's one in Moscow.
Yeah, they're having them all over right now. Basically, like every major city is having massive protests.
Yeah.
So, Diabeto, you sent me this. The current situation in Ukraine. Let me downsize it to fit it onto the screen here for everyone.
Oh, that's not great. Okay, no, they're back.
So I'm going to go ahead and move it just a little bit to show. Also, the background noise people who are watching the stream can hear, that is the live stream in Kiev for those who are wanting to watch that at all.
Oh, you actually put it up? I'm watching an alternative one, like the military camps.
I'm just going to go ahead and zoom around this map instead of trying to show the whole thing because of how detailed it is. So this is an estimate. This is not official. So basically, it looks like they were able to take the town of Sumy. That city was surrounded as of this morning, and they finally were able to take it. As you can see, the Russian line is basically bending around Chernihiv, however it's pronounced, and they can't really go further than that. Kiev is having Chernihiv. Kiev is having some advancements in the north, and looks like they had some people come in from the west there. There are some small pockets where paratroopers were dropped, it looks like. I'm not too sure if that's actually confirmed or not.
There was a TikTok of the Russian paratroopers filming themselves going in. And I thought that was hilarious that the Russians are actually doing that.
And as you can see here, whatever this was, because the Russians were here, and now they're back here, so they definitely got pushed back pretty far. And then down here you have these advancements. So you can see the Russian line bending around these larger urban areas and trying to take these different cities. So 2 days in, and the only major city that they've been able to really take is Sumy, but that was just today, and that was not that's not some huge major loss for them. Obviously, every city taken
give it up.
Pretty much. They surrounded the city, and there were some very, very light forces in there, and whatever was within the city basically escaped or just shed their military clothes and blended in with the rest of the people, from what I've heard.
Yeah, and become guerrillas, yeah.
Go ahead, Alfonso.
No, you go. I'm
the thing on this map that I think is really interesting is how noodly it is, if that makes sense. Like, the area around Sumy, for example, really the area north of Kiev is the only spot that they have a substantial rear. The rest of these areas are
zoom in, it's the roads.
They're not really capturing much.
They're on the road. That's why they're so thin. They're not because of the spring muds.
Well, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So, that coupled with the number of videos and the footage that I've seen of like destroyed Russian convoys, it's interesting to me that they're really only taking roads, and it seems like for the most part they're losing a shit ton of things on roads based on how many
Yeah.
convoys
Well,
I've seen
because they've
damaged.
left it too late, basically, is the thing. Is because what was good about them invading at the start of this month is that, and normally in Ukraine until about, I think it's mid-March,
Oh, yeah,
the ground is hard enough that you can drive tanks across the steppe.
they're having the weather start to turn
Yeah.
Yeah,
because it's
the
getting
weather's
warmer.
turned like half a month earlier.
Yeah, so
Oh.
like right now
Thank
the ground
Mother
is
Nation again.
semi frozen. But if this invasion lasts much longer, it's going to start to melt, and it's going to make it more and more difficult for Russia to not only
I-
take land but to hold it, because their
I
armored
think it
vehicles
will,
are going
yeah.
to be less and less effective. Now, this is me
And
speaking from
like, see,
my chair at home with zero military experience. So, if I am sounding like an ignorant piece of garbage, it's because I am one. I'm just self-aware.
noted.
But yeah, you can definitely see where there's paratroop drops and whatnot. But yeah, like this area right here on Sumai, however you pronounce it, the Russians
Russian
invaded
language.
to try to go off and push down towards Cherni, Chera, Chernihiv. How again? I'm very bad at this. But they didn't clear out this one section here that seems to be surrounded. Now, that doesn't mean that any troops there are cut off, because these battle lines are fluid. We are in we have entered a era of warfare that is very, very fluid now. And so any troops here could easily make their way out, especially with the limited numbers of Russian
Right.
soldiers. But Russia doesn't really care about this. They just care about holding these supply lines and pushing forward even further to hook up and eventually surround the city and then support Kiev. But as you can see, their push to go south this way towards their original plan, pushing south in this way towards Rivne and so on, really just isn't happening. They have to take Kiev, and I'm sure that that's because they assume that they'd already have the city. But
Yeah.
It seems like they were trying in to decapitate the Ukrainian government, and that doesn't seem to have worked. So now they have to catch up via
right,
of
I
land.
looked up the weather forecast for Kiev just out of curiosity,
You can
and
find
so
it here.
the fucking average high for February is 32 degrees. They don't have a single high for the next 10 days that's under 36.
and that is in
What's that
American
in
digits,
metric?
or is that in
That's in Fahrenheit. That's in Fahrenheit.
freaking
What's it in
monster?
Celsius?
They don't have like they have two, three. They have like maybe 3 or 4 days in the next 10 that have any below freezing temperatures. And then once they, according to their monthly averages, once they hit like March, it jumps in temperature and stops freezing.
So I'm loading
So
up
the
my
Oh, yeah, wait.
flight app
Yeah,
right
'cause
now to try
Fahrenheit
to see
freezing
what the weather
32,
looks like for
isn't it?
this area. So I can get a pretty accurate reading thanks to
They
flight
got
planning.
they got a lot of sun in the forecast for them, which partly cloudy, but that's not going to make the ground situation any better.
Well, the thing is, clear skies mean more chance of
So it is
freezing.
currently raining in Kiev, in some areas of Kiev, according to the local METARS, which is an aeronautical measurement for rain around airports, or just weather, I should say. I'm gonna just try to break that down into as simple as possible. It is
Yeah.
freezing. It is really cold there right now, but it isn't snowing. So rain is going to be the biggest killer for it. And yeah, it looks like a lot of light rain. You can't see it on the live stream, so I'm not too sure how accurate this is. Sometimes they're a little delayed, and I don't know how bad or good the Russian ones are, or the Ukrainian ones are. Apologies. But yeah, it looks like a lot of these are reporting light rain across. I don't have availability for radar to look at weather patterns, but it does look like currently it's raining. So if that is the trend and it's only going to get worse, then it's just going to get muddier and muddier in a lot of this area, especially in the east. So unfortunately,
from what I've heard, apparently already it's too soft.
the restricted airspace hasn't updated at all. When the invasion first started, the restricted airspace was pretty well updated and gave a good view as to where the fronts are. And it still gives a good view as to where the fronts are sitting right now. But as it stands, they have not updated, they have not moved. And that makes sense because, again, it's a fluid battle. And they're not going to be worrying about updating restricted airspace for people who aren't flying. But
Yeah.
Day one, it was very useful to show like where the attacks were coming from, and yeah.
And then I would like to mention like how like somebody like me who is seeing this and like I am interested in this, but like seeing the reaction about like we were talking about it all day today. I did not go to school the other day on Thursday because I don't know, I just didn't feel like going, and I was literally just watching like live updates all freaking day, the Discord about what was going on. No, that's not the most accurate sources, of course, but like we were mainly like we don't really there are a lot of memes being made and of course all that joking around going on. Like at face value, like everyone was showing support for Ukraine no matter where you're from, and like in my school. Was in consumers education, and we were mainly talking about like how the gas pumps are being affected, how gas prices are going up because of the fact that we are not we, of course, hopefully we won't, but Ukraine and Russia are in a state of war, and it's like that's.
I think gas prices jumped $1 in 3 hours on the day of the invasion.
Here in Illinois, we haven't felt it that much. It's like 30 cents up for us.
No, just in the European natural gas market, it jumped up. Like a whole euro, or like a few dollars per unit.
Here has been too bad for us, and it probably won't be unless we actually declare war, which I hope.
No, give it a couple weeks.
Yeah, I've been monitoring.
This sort of thing has knock-on effects that won't be felt for the next month, probably. Give it a month, and then we'll really see the sort of the price cascade.
And right now, it's like
$5.16.
It's like $5.16 a gallon right now, or something like that for Illinois right now. Or that's what I at least remember today at the gas station. But that's a number I saw somewhere about something. Might be just for a freaking hot dog. I don't know. But like I was talking to like my classmates about it, and like we had a full discussion about this in multiple of my classes today that weren't like of course English. We talked about it. We talked about in consumer's ed, history, of course, because of living history right now. The only ones like we didn't talk about was like in physical education and mathematics. Like that's the only two classes we didn't talk about it. And I'm like waking everybody up because like they have like everyone is like other than like the actual teachers themselves and the adults in the room, nobody really cares or they don't really understand the full story. Most of the kids were worried about getting drafted more than like they were more worried about figuring out like how to get out of a draft than how to like help out in any way or getting more information about what is going on. Like, I was
You're
telling
not going
them
to get drafted, mate.
All right, so real quick.
And I told them,
don't want to interrupt us. So some breaking information. I don't know how old this is. I haven't been keeping up, but apparently, according to the feed that I've just pulled up, like as of just a few minutes ago, this main push down the main avenue just got repulsed back out of Kiev. So if you look at the small mini map of Kiev, the northern area here, you have secured positions. But this assault down this main strip has been fully repulsed out of Kiev, according to sources on the ground there. So how true that is, I don't know.
So
this is just getting reported.
The part coming in from the eastern side of that small inset.
Yep. Meanwhile, lots of planes, according to some information Diabeto just found, reports of heavy fighting southwest of Kiev. Sounds like with the aircraft action and noise in the area that Russia has attempted to land paratroopers, which would kind of fall in line with what they already hold down there in Vasilkiv.
Town that starts with a V.
Whatever it is, I'm bad at pronouncing English words that all I've done is read instead of like say. So this is just a whole other animal for me.
precisely.
Um,
Anyway, yeah. So like, I'm kind of really hoping those Russian paratroopers just get like just pitchforked to death by the civilians. That'd be super hilarious.
Or like Crete.
Yeah, like yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, this is gonna be Crete 2.0 if they just land in the middle of nowhere and then pitchfork farmers come out and just like, hey, what the hell are you doing here? I don't know if you
Except
guys
those
saw, but
pitchfork
there was a
farmers are going to have
lady
fucking AR-15s.
AK-47s. Yeah, it's be very interesting. I don't know if you saw that. There's an old lady, well, not old, older lady, in Kiev handing sunflower seed packets to the Russian troops. And like the Russian troops are taking it like, oh, look how nice they are. Look how nice the Ukrainians are to our Russian brethren. And she goes, no, you fucker. It's so when you die, sunflowers grow.
This is a bomb.
Like you like slice the seeds or whatever, and make it grow. I'm like, that's just fucking hilarious.
That's so cute.
Like the stories that are coming out of Ukraine, like of like everyone that's like defending it. Like there's that samurai in the middle of Kiev somewhere. I don't know what he's
Oh,
doing
the Japanese
anymore.
ambassador.
Yeah, do you not see my tweet? Not my tweet, but I put it in the Discord. I'll send it to you right now.
No, I've seen it.
Okay, good. Yeah, like there's just story after story that's coming out. That, like it's so heartwarming to see like how people always say like oh this generation does not want to fight anymore. Like they're not willing to do it like what they need to do for their
Of course
country.
we don't.
Like if you look at Ukraine right now, like the entire country is united under this one common goal of kick the Russians out of their
Yeah,
country.
it's a different country though.
I
It
mean,
is a
true,
different
but
country. It's not the United States.
so,
I would say yeah, you're right.
Tyler, is that video that you just sent? Is that footage of what's left of the Russian assault in down the main
Well,
avenue?
I can't tell for sure because I've seen a lot of tweets talking about Victory Avenue, but a quick look on Google Maps, I can't find anything in Kiev called Victory Avenue, but I think it might just be that it's, in Ukrainian or Russian and not English, and I don't know what that translation is.
Gotcha.
But based on the map I sent you
Well-
earlier, I'm assuming on Google Maps it's this E40 is like the main road west into Kiev.
Is it
And
Pobjeda?
that's huh?
Pobjeda? P-O... I think victory is Pobjeda.
I'm not sure, but there's Paramoy Avenue, maybe. But anyways, the main road that I can find into Kiev lines up on the map with where they claim that push was going. It looks like. Let me do a quick translate.
We need to find a Ukrainian so we can actually have this translated.
So, according to another source
Yeah,
on the
Paramoha.
ground,
So yeah, that in that case, if Paramohi is victory in Ukrainian or Russian, then yes, that is footage of the Russian convoy on that western push.
I'm going to go ahead and share the
Damn.
screen with this so the viewers can go ahead and get a look here. Let me go ahead and add that 1 second. But yeah, apparently let me just real quick read this report off. During the storming attempt at a military base near Beretsk metro station, I don't know where that is within Kiev or if that is even there. Their attempts were rebuked, their forces eliminated, according to the source. Again, I'm not too sure how legitimate that is.
Yeah, Beretiska is the western main road into Ukraine. It's about a quarter of the way into the city, looks like.
Well, if there's a major bridge that is the only thing that allows them to attack from that area, it's destroyed now. So there is no bridge.
Then they blow. Somebody posted in the Discord about the guy who actually blew it up, who like sacrificed.
No. That was yesterday. We're talking about right now. So I guess there must be a.
Damn.
So well, okay. So
Well, look
real
at the
quick,
map. It's like
so
5 bridges.
there is a bridge on the other side of the river. Here, I don't think that it's visible on this map. It's right off in this area here. There's a bridge, and the other night, Russian forces were advancing on Kiev, and there was a Ukrainian engineer unit there lining a bridge, a major bridge with explosives. They didn't have time to set up a proper detonation system because the Russian forces were right on top of them. So a guy decided to get everyone off the bridge, and he ran onto the bridge to blow it up, and it killed him in the explosion, but took down the bridge and stopped the Russians from being able to attack from that side of the river. Someone posted his name.
That's the thing I was thinking.
Vitaly
It's-
Skakun. And there are people who are comparing him to a suicide bomber who would purposely kill civilians. So there are people out here who are just absolute morons. Anyway,
Yeah. I mean, people think suicide bombing and they instantly go to fucking jihadist.
right. So let me go ahead and pull this up. So this is my unsigned in Twitter feed. This is some video of. This is near the metro station. This is from an apartment, I guess. But the overall situation after the assault shows the destroyed Russian vehicles, supposedly, along the road.
Allegedly, yeah.
Alleged destroyed Russian vehicles. So
That's the hard part I've noticed. Like, because these countries' technology is basically the exact same for the most part. Like, it's very difficult to tell whose
Right.
tanks and like.
the best, like,
Other than, like,
I
other
wish
than,
I could
like,
even
actual,
say,
markings.
like, I can't even say that, oh yeah, well the Ukrainians are just going to be more outdated because they're not as a prepared nation for war. Russia's army is not at all
They're not-
modernized.
yeah.
There's a lot of
They
equipment
just
within
aren't.
Russia that's still stuck in the Cold War, rather than being modernized like maybe Britain, even Poland. I think
Tanks.
Poland has more modern military than Russia does when it comes to
Yeah, because
overall
and
modernization.
Also,
I
Poland's
mean,
whole
Russia doesn't
war-
have the
like,
money
their-
to upgrade.
No, they
Poland's
don't.
their whole army is based on defending Poland and defeating Russians and Germans. Like, that's their whole thing now.
Right,
It's like, hey, we have to be ready in case this happens for a third time.
right.
Like, we have to be ready for that. No,
Well,
like,
not against the Germans. They're part of the EU.
yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, they are ready. Like, they are.
Poland
like,
has
they
a
don't
bad
care
history
anymore.
of being
They are
underprepared
ready.
for war. Granted, World
Yeah,
War
exactly.
World War II, they were as prepared as they could be, and there were people who thought that the Polish were going to do better than they did.
Yeah,
but the
probably.
Poles during World War II did do very well.
They did, yeah,
Oh,
they held.
incredibly well.
They held probably as
Apparently-
best as they could have.
I'm gonna butt in. Got another interesting tweet. Those paratroop forces that were they were trying to land in Vasil Kiev to the southwest.
Yep.
Only still heavy fighting, but multiple reports of shooting down a Russian helicopter, an Su-25, and another transport aircraft.
Jeez. So
In which case, if these are all true, which I doubt all of them are
So-
true, but
here's the thing: if that pocket, which is right there, can get retaken, we'll see the proof. Because my assumption
Yeah.
is that these aircraft are going down in combat areas, so we'll see the proof if Ukraine can retake that pocket. I don't think Ukraine's focused on retaking ground right now at all, so we're not going to see
I
it
don't
for a
think they
while.
are.
You're they're on
They
defense.
just aren't.
Right. That pocket
You
probably
cannot
doesn't.
advance when you're. It's that simple.
Let me check if there's an actual airfield there. But I don't think that they're focused on that pocket at all. I don't think they even really care. They're just trying to stop it from getting reinforced.
Right.
yeah, it seems like they're just trying to take them out before they can land, rather than
Right. Rather than trying to take that
actually-
pocket out.
actually
Because
doing
Right.
anything back. Yeah.
because that pocket will just starve. And the Ukrainians know
Yeah.
that. So they just have to keep the
Ukrainians
Russians
are-
from linking up with it.
And
which-
they're perfectly fine with letting them do that. Yeah, they're more than happy to let them starve to death.
Right, yeah. So let me see if there's...
And the main
It'd
problem in the
probably
Russian
be the best
strategy is just the fact that they don't have any concentration of force anywhere along the line.
Right.
I mean, the most
I've heard
concentrated
a lot
part
of people.
is the thrust towards Kiev, but even then, they're still trying to advance across a 2,000-kilometer border or whatever the fuck it is.
There's no
At the same
airports
time-
And they
in
just
that
don't have
area.
enough men.
So Russia can't land airplanes there. There's no way for them to land airplanes. The only way that they can get supplies to that pocket is with
Be like
helicopters
airdropping.
or airdropping supplies. So
And they could just shoot those down all day.
yeah, Ukraine has the ability to take them down, especially with it being confirmed that the person who has been nicknamed, that there is now someone in the Ukrainian Air Force with the nickname of Ghost of Kiev. That's been confirmed by the ex-president.
Yeah.
Like, even if you want to say like, okay, well, that's just propaganda. Okay, cool. There is a Ukrainian pilot who now has that nickname. Whether or not he has the kills
Doesn't
that they're
matter,
reporting, there is now a pilot with that nickname. So to
It's
everyone who
it's
hates
like
it,
every.
there is now someone with
If
that
you,
nickname.
and I'll say this: if you hate it, get over it. It's just you're
Like,
not gonna do anything
I'm
about
pretty
it.
sure that when that started, they basically took the dude with the most confirmed kills, and they're like, "Yep,
Just gave it to
congratulations."
him, yeah. You're now the
Um,
Ghost of Kiev.
so-
Congratulations, son.
regardless, the Ukrainian Air Force is kicking butt. The Ukrainian ground troops
Yeah,
are
they are
kicking
doing
butt.
very well.
This is the first.
Ukraine is doing very well. I would say that they are doing very well for what they're facing.
This is the first war where both sides can go toe to toe with each other since World War II.
Yeah, I
that-
think
that's-
quite, but
That's not like you can go ahead and say, okay, well, what about the secondary
I think
power
the term
wars
is near
in
peer. They are
in-
near peer powers.
right? I mean, we've had similar things like with the Indian-Pakistani wars and with the Iran-Iraq wars and similar things like that. But those are all
But nothing on this scale.
right. Like
yeah, nothing on this scale.
India-
geopolitically,
India
especially.
has a lot of weight that they can throw around on the global scale, whereas Pakistan has next to nothing besides the fact that they have nukes. Iran and Iraq, even at the time, they weren't exactly these huge, like, yeah, we can throw our weight around. Ukraine
Well, it's
has,
a minor regional war.
right,
And conflict.
but all of those nations, everyone was like, yeah, their militaries aren't exactly the greatest. Like, wouldn't be too difficult for a UN nation to just step in and say, "Alright, guys, calm down," and just end it.
Yeah,
This isn't the case here. Like,
this is a whole different animal.
this is not
This is
only
modern
peer to peer,
warfare.
but both are modernized armies. Iran, Iraq, even for the time, not exactly modernized. India, Pakistan, when they were fighting each other, not exactly modernized. They were in the process of it, but they weren't. This is modern armies, peer to peer, going at it for the first time since World War II.
Right.
And
I would-
it'll be like, I say that with a sense of understanding that this is the worst, like, damn near close to the worst case scenario, and
Yeah.
the last thing that should ever have happened.
Absolutely.
It is at the same time
Yeah.
something that we have to understand is not exactly
Talking about Ukraine.
something that we can just sort of just push aside and be like, yeah, okay, yeah, that happened. Like,
Interesting. Yeah.
we have to understand that there are, there is a lot on the line with this, not just for Ukraine, but for in a very morbid sense, military theory.
Oh, not even that. The entire geopolitical system
Right.
that the world runs on is being shaken at its very foundation.
There
From a New Zealand perspective, we rely on the rules-based order that is the international system as such. Is that states operating within the framework set by the UN and other conventions, other institutions, and this is breaking that down. It's kicking the bloody door in, so that it's the rule of might is right is something that small states, and for me, New Zealand in particular, it is something that we cannot have as the rule. We have an international system for a reason, and an international system of rules and standards of doing things. And this throws all of that out the window. This is the destruction of modern international relations.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is going like there's no going back to the world of 2019 and before. You could have gone off and
Not quite.
try to make arguments for that like last year or earlier this year. But no.
Can't anymore. No.
What was 2 years ago is gone. What was 3 years ago is gone.
We've just witnessed the end of an era.
Yeah.
I think
We've been witnessing it for about 3 years now.
You
this
can watch
is
it
the end
slowly
of the post-Cold War era. What comes next, we don't know.
Right. Which is interesting to watch from someone who has always loved reading history. Just to sort of be at a transition phase is one of those weird things that, you had a whole generation living in an era where there was no transition phase. You have people who existed and never got to witness a mass transition phase. You know, between the 50s and the 90s, you had plenty of people born, grow up, and die before that transition phase happens, right? Between 1948 and 1991, you had one era. That's like almost
and
50
people
years.
were born and then definitely died then.
Right. So to think that, you know, like even the people who were born during the Second World War and got to see that transition from interwar into the Cold War, they wouldn't remember it. People born in the early 90s don't remember the transition from Cold War into post-Cold War. So you can even stretch that out even longer into the early 40s and have a longer stretch of time showing even more people who grew up without ever witnessing a transition phase. So to be here, being able to comprehend what's going on and understand the stakes, it's
the sheer significance of it.
right. It makes me think for a second, like, what if we're still around in 30 years? You know, we're gonna get to see the crappy History Channel documentaries made about this era. You know, like, how are we gonna remember it versus
Man-made
how
horrors beyond our comprehension.
right? Think about all the older people who lived through the Cold War, and think about how when you try to talk to them about the Cold War and what you've studied about the Cold War, a lot of times what you've studied is different than what they remember. And it's not even from them being wrong or you being wrong. It's simply we have more information than they had, and they're not going to take the time to right. They're not going to take the time to read about it because they experienced it, and so they just feel like they don't need to. We're interested in the subject, so we're going to read about it, and now we have information they never did. And so I'm curious to see what's going to happen in 30, 40, 50 years. What is the next generation, the next two generations, what are they going to learn about what we're going through right now that we'll never even care to learn simply because we'll be older and not care? In 50 years, I'll be 72. You think in 50 years I'm going to care about some new documents released about the war in Ukraine? You know?
Maybe
I'll be that much of a weirdo. But, you know, there's going to be some kid who will be.
Yeah. They're probably going to ask. Somebody's going to have to come along and ask us about it.
Tyler. So apparently Tyler's reporting that he's seeing reports that Russian forces are getting pushed out of Kiev. So if that's true, that's
the caveat there is still a lot of gunfire in and around Kiev. So I'm not sure how accurate them being pushed back is, or if it's even might be a situation of like, wow, they ran away a street, we're pushing them out, boys.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see what how much momentum the Russian military can hold.
I think they're already slowing down.
My assumption is not much. Yeah, they already are slowing down.
Well, just because they have the way the Russian military is set up is very conservative in terms of old theory, right? Like, you have this system where people are forced into service as conscripts, and you have probably, I think, if I recall correctly, I haven't done a ton of research into this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, a lower standard for training because of it, and not as high standard for equipment issuance because, again, it's conscripts. A higher percentage of their population is going to be in the military than any other country, and so they're going to have lower standards for training and lower standards for equipment simply because of economic necessity. Whereas places like America volunteer. So America not only volunteer, even though I think Russia and America spend very proportional amounts of their economic budget on their militaries.
Oh yeah, the GDP percentage is quite similar, I think.
But the difference is America runs off a lot of completely volunteers. You know, so America's military and percentage of its population is a lot less, and so the effect on the economy isn't as great, and so men can be better fitted, better trained, better outfitted, And then you look at Ukraine, and the Ukrainians not only are they just being given guns, but like they have something to fight for. These Russian troops are being forced into service.
Fighting.
A lot of them don't know why they're there.
People that they probably are related to.
And you know what's funnier? Half of the troops don't even know what the hell they're doing. Like it tactically, like shoot it, like they don't know what the hell they're doing across
Right.
the board. Like
so
there's reports of what Russian training is, and you shoot guns approximately 3 times your entire service.
right.
Like mandatory year or whatever it is, and then of course it gets extended during wartime. So now they're
Going
basically
back to the
troops in.
GDP thing, Russia spends
Like-
4.3% of GDP. United States spends 3.7. So it's similar.
So it's similar. In fact, Russia spends more, and their troops are worse for wear when it comes
They're
to
worse
equipment
Well, yeah,
and
because
supplies.
their GDP is such a drastic.
They have a smaller
than,
economy than Italy.
Yeah.
And yet they have more people in their military than Italy, and they're spending 4% of that GDP that is Italy's size on their military, with a comparable number of people in their military to the United States. So,
which is why they haven't modernized, because they're reusing old equipment.
right.
So
So
they're just spending
the
fucking
troops,
money on it.
the Russian troops don't want to be there. They are poorly equipped, poorly trained, don't want to be in the
Probably
military,
Poorly fed.
poorly fed. Reports that they don't even have proper supplies to keep fighting. That there are men being issued only 3 magazines. You know, let's just go
Those
ahead
are
and go
probably
back
like
to World
half
War
full.
One and go to the myth of the myth in World War II was
The one with
one
the
gun
rifle.
for
The
right,
one
the one
with
with
the
the
rifle
rifle shoots. That happened in
The other
World War
one
One.
follows.
What is up with Russia deciding to go to war with absolute garbage industry?
I think
Um,
I think Putin is that like I believe Putin is this. He's being blinded by what his advisors like. If you see like what his chief spy was telling him, the dude was terrified to say anything. He was supporting Ukraine, but he was terrified to speak
Right.
the truth to Putin. I don't think any member of that
Well-
military is telling him the truth.
Here's the
I don't
thing.
believe it.
Here's the thing.
Yeah, we did go
A
over
lot of
that bit,
people
didn't we?
are comparing Putin to Stalin. There's a difference. Stalin was competent with his military, enough to
He
win
knew
a
what
war,
was
Stalin
going on.
didn't declare an offensive war.
except against
Right.
Finland, which they got their
But
butts
that
handed
was,
to them.
and then Finland.
But they're comparing Putin to Stalin, which doesn't make sense. Stalin is more comparable to one of the czars. I was talking to a buddy of mine in a group
Yeah.
chat, and we were talking about
Well,
Putin's attitude, and he's a lot more comparable to a czar than he is to Stalin in terms of just how he
Oh,
acts,
yeah.
what he does. You know, he's obviously not comparable to Tsar Nicholas because Tsar Nicholas had a moral compass.
Right.
But Putin is
Well,
more comparable to a czar than he is to a communist dictator, simply because of the way he acts,
Well, he's virulently
policies.
anti-communist.
Exactly, that too.
And
He
the
talks
past
about
relations of the Russian Federation are far more like Russia in the 1870s to 19 whatever.
people don't realize that late Soviet Union was not exactly communist at all, and that's
Yeah,
what
not really.
and that's what Putin grew up in, and that's what he remembers as Russia, and that's what
Right.
he mentions as being the greatest tragedy of the 20th century is the collapse of that
No,
Soviet
actually,
Union.
I can go on about that. His greatest tragedy comment, but carry on.
But anyway, the whole thing is like he believes these things. He wants Russia to. There's a couple motivations that people are theorizing that might be all the same. You know, part of the package of why he's doing what he's doing, and that
I
is
believe
he-
I've heard
he
most
wants
of them. I believe
to-
they're all partially true.
he wants to increase Russia's sphere of influence to be a counter to NATO influence, so that he can throw Russian weight around the world better, and gain more security for Russia and give Russia a stage on the international page of politics, similar to how it was in the 80s and 70s and 60s. At the same time, he knows his time is running out, and he knows that he needs to set himself up a legacy so he doesn't become like one of those intermittent Soviet leaders who just gets forgotten. He is a very arrogant and egotistical person, and he cares about his own personal legacy. At the same time, he's very nationalistic and wants to make sure Russia has a secured place on the global stage. While at the same time, he understands that his popularity at home is waning, and he wants to continue being the leader of Russia until he dies. And he thinks, because of how he has been leading Russia, that a war like this, which ends super quickly, which it hasn't, I mean, obviously, if it ends in 3 days, that's a very, very
Yeah.
quick war, but it's not.
But like in
Um,
terms of like the modern era, it's not a quick war.
But he's thinking like something super quick where Russia gets influence and they defeat these horrible people, will gain all this support, so he invades Ukraine. Because to him, a quick victory will secure Russia another puppet state to counter NATO and counter American influence and throw Russia even more into the ring of nations and give it even more weight when it comes to politics and maybe set up a new semi-Soviet Union style nation. It secures his
using the
legacy
Union
more.
State framework already exists.
It secures his legacy more as someone to be remembered instead of forgotten, and
Right.
it secures him popularity at home because now Russia has better economic security. Instead, what he's gotten is no one wants to work with Russia anymore. He's losing support on the home front, and the war is not ending quickly. And now his legacy, which was already on the fence, has been tainted. So I don't see this turning out positively for Putin at all. I don't see a positive outcome to this. I don't see him using nukes because people thinking that he's a crazy maniac are just falling for anti-Russian propaganda.
Right.
But like think about all the crazy propaganda from the previous world wars. How are people pointing to that and saying, "Yeah, I would never fall for that," and yet they're falling for the propaganda talking about how Putin's going to use the nukes? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think he's like I've been saying this. People have been afraid of that. I was like, that's what the main thing that everyone's been saying. Like, hey, is Russia allowed to use nukes and all that? Like, that's what I was being asked a lot about. And I'm like, I believe they are because their nuclear treaty's up. But I believe that's only with the United States. I'm not 100% on that, of course. And I'm like, I don't think though he's dumb enough, even if he is senile, like that senile, to actually go that far. Because I think he has enough pride and too much of an arrogance to the Russian military to think that he can win it tactically and win it on the ground, not having to use nukes as a last resort.
Well, nukes also would, I mean, completely destroy what he's trying to do for the most part, because they would make, I mean, if he drops them in Ukraine, assuming he's dropping them on population center, they would make a good part of the country basically unusable and worth nothing. It would completely destroy his whole, sphere of influence thing, because, yeah, he'd have a, subjugated country, but it wouldn't necessarily expand his sphere of influence if
Right.
he just got it because he wiped 2 cities off the map.
Yeah. And even if he wins it,
turned the rest of the world irrevocably against
Right.
nukes, he's not getting anything he wants from anybody else.
Right.
And that's assuming that just at that point, like, okay, well, now he needs to go to war because he has lost his damn mind.
Right.
and like I'd say this, like if he even like wins it, like on the ground, like say in the next couple weeks or so, Ukraine is not gonna be like the citizens of Ukraine. They've already been defiant. They're gonna be even more defiant if they actually get taken over. Like they're not gonna stop just because you
No.
took Kiev.
No, not at all.
Just because you like yeah,
This
you,
becomes an
congratulations.
insurgent war.
Right.
If-
Congratulations, you took Kiev. That's like if the Germans took Moscow. Cool,
Right.
you took the capital, but they're gonna keep fighting your ass. They're
Right.
not gonna stop. They have
And-
global support
think
from
ab-
a bunch
like,
of nations.
Look at what happened on Snake Island. That, I think, is one of the sole reasons why Ukraine, like, as soon as that Snake Island event broke out, like, people started learning of it, I feel like there was a change in tone amongst Ukrainians. Like, they went from, like, yeah, we're going to resist and fight back to, like, shutting up and actually doing it. Right? Like, that's the
Right,
vibe I got. Like, obviously, people were fighting back and everything like that, but I feel like it changed from going
It's the
from
push
a...
from talk
We're going
action.
to right. They went from like just talking about it to 13 guys just
Doing it.
with zero ability to defend themselves said screw you to the Russians. We're going to win this. That's how I feel like it happened. And I feel like if Zelensky is a very intelligent person who is extremely brave and he's staying in Kiev. And I think that if Kiev gets captured, he's going to be killed. I think he's going to
Absolutely.
he's
It's
going.
the
He's not
target
going.
number one.
He's not going to. He's not going to retreat out with his troops. If he somehow
yeah,
gets out of Kiev, it's not because he did it voluntarily. And
It'll probably
Absolutely.
be like
And
Ukraine
here's-
pushing
Yeah,
forces
and here's the thing:
out
if
of
he
it.
gets pulled out, it's because he's injured and can't move himself, and that will boost Ukrainian morale and resolve. If he gets killed in Kiev, that will boost Ukrainian morale and
Anything
resolve.
that happens to that man, it's gonna boost.
Right. He
it's
knows
gonna
that.
boost the morale.
The only
Yeah,
thing
he-
that the
he's
only
a
thing he
body
could do,
slam.
the only thing he could do that would be a detriment to Ukraine is hide or retreat.
Leave.
Right.
At
I
this
no.
point,
I
he's
think even if he
got
did
to, like,
that,
Bulk hero
say
and
he was
Icon
hiding-
and people outside of Ukraine as well. That like, if Putin's plan was to go in and pop him off early, like that plan is completely useless now because anything he does to that man is gonna backfire on him.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I
why.
think you
That's why.
actually
That's
would
why
be
Putin's
good.
seeking
Like-
peace now, because he can no longer install a puppet government and have an easy victory. They're trying to. What's happening is Putin is trying to delay the peace talks so that he can bargain from a position of strength because he knows his position is untenable.
Hmm.
That's my opinion, and my opinion
My
is completely
theory-
uneducated and probably wrong. So,
Here's
Um,
my theory about what will happen to the president. I think him and his staff will eventually get found out the location. Gonna start because it's not just him. It's him and his like chief staff of I forgot what the hell they are. It was in Ukrainian, so I didn't really understand it. The translation wasn't very good from the BBC or whatever it was I was watching it on.
The
I forgot which
Ukrainian
channel I
staff,
watched.
general staff.
Yeah. I think that they're at some point going to get overrun, and either two things will happen: some sort of Ukrainian special forces are going to go in and pull him out, and like make sure he stays alive at all costs, or the Japanese samurai that's in there is going to pull him out for no goddamn reason, just like
Yeah.
protect
Can you
him with his
imagine-
life. No, that sounds completely
Being
dumb,
overrun in
but
their
that's
office, making
what I
a
am.
dramatic last stand, and being saved by the Japanese ambassador as a samurai.
Yeah.
Dude.
And that'll be a six samurai song, six Sabaton song in like 3 years.
At
Oh,
that point,
boy.
like if I was a Russian, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm done with this. Fuck that shit.
Yeah, fuck this.
yeah.
Can I join you guys? Can I swap teams?
I wonder if he sent a
You
fax
guys have
yet.
fucking samurai.
Yeah.
You guys have
Um,
samurais, you have ghosts, you have a whole bunch of shit.
Also, they have a Reaper. This is probably
Oh, they also
propaganda.
have
This is probably propaganda, but there's reports coming in as of 4 hours ago, I should say. Sorry, fake news, I guess. 4 hours ago, reports coming out of Ukraine of a soldier being nicknamed the Ukrainian Reaper, who has apparently sniped over 20 Russian soldiers.
Simo Hayhav
Fucking hell.
reincarnated.
So probably fake, but it's interesting.
I wouldn't. That's a thing that I would definitely not doubt. Because like, if you look how skilled like snipers are in the modern day, they're trained to not get killed, not get captured, and like pick one off and run away. 2 days now, I bet he has racked up a pretty high kill count already. Like, I wouldn't doubt like that. That to me is in the same vein of the Ghost of Kiev, where it's 100% possible, but it's probably being fibbed a little bit and like exaggerated for propaganda purposes.
Yeah.
I don't
I
blame
think-
them.
hang on,
I don't.
real
I would
quick.
do the same thing.
You're cutting
Hey,
out,
whoever
man.
that is, being a robot, I think the Russians are hacking you. They'll take you out. Damn. They know what's going on.
So what were you saying?
Is that any better?
That's
I was gonna
Sounds
say,
good.
it's particularly with Russians
never
with
mind.
how they're moving troops by following roads and just trying to get to population center as fast as they can. That's pretty good territory for a sniper.
Yeah, that's
Oh
true.
yeah.
So
if you just have a
Oh, yeah,
slow
look at
column,
Mossy in the Winter War.
I'm looking at everything except for anything that comes out of Russia with a sense of, yeah, this could be true. I don't believe anything that comes out of Russia because they've been lying this entire time. Like if
Yeah.
they say,
I just
especially
can't believe them.
especially with the lack of like footage coming in from their ground troops. Like morning of day one, they had
know what's
plenty of
funny?
footage of it, but now they just don't because they're not being as successful as they thought they would be.
I feel like this. I feel like I'm
I'm
kind
gonna
of
have to
missing
take
like those
leave.
like
Temporarily, possibly, I have to go get
Vietnam-style
relief from
reporters.
work. But if you guys are still chatting when I get back, I might rejoin.
All right.
interesting. Noted. Have fun. Yourself.
Which
I was saying
Oh,
is that I kind of miss those like Vietnam-style reporters where they're literally on the ground with the ground troops. I think
Well, they're
if we
still
had
there.
that,
that's
Yeah,
still
I know,
happening.
but like,
Those
we
are still
had
there
them
in
coming
mass.
out, like in mass.
Those
But I
they're
haven't
still
seen
there
any
all over the
results.
place.
Where the hell,
That's
where
where
the
we're
hell
getting
are
all
they? I
the
haven't seen any.
where do you think we're getting all the
The
news
hell,
from?
I have no clue. I think you should look at Reddit.
Like
and
we're
Twitter.
we're getting all the news from the people on the ground, buddy. From
But I
the
want like
reporters.
an actual like want an actual reporter armed to the teeth just going in there. Like that's what
Then
I
they're a
want.
combatant and they can
I
get shot. That's not how that works, dude.
Yeah, but
Like,
you could, no.
like, there are a
you're
ton
already
of
wearing
reporters. There are a ton of reporters
You're
in Ukraine.
you're already wearing a helmet and a chest plate. Might as well just go all in.
Right, and then
Screw
get
it.
shot.
Yeah.
And then you won't have any reporters left.
Yeah, but yeah, you can always
Then
find
then
one
you'll
of
have
those
an actual
people in
reason to
college.
complain. Is that your whole point is to try to actually get a reason to complain because you want reporters with guns? Like, yeah, they're
I want
shooting
to go
people
in
with
there.
a camera,
Yeah,
dude.
I want to go in there. I want to go to Ukraine. That'd be fun. I don't care.
It would
Also,
not be fun, you fucking
Yes, it
moron.
would. Yes, it would.
I'll cut you off if you keep up with this tone deafness. Don't test me.
Okay. Yeah.
The most
Think that's a lot.
abhorrent conditions in the maybe not the most
love-
abhorrent conditions in the world right now, but it would be the most disgusting fucking frozen hellhole that you have ever seen. And
Right.
don't
Sounds like
mention
Chicago.
Chicago.
Okay. You already knew.
It has got fucking nothing on this.
It is cold as shit up here, though.
I will literally kick you out of this group chat.
Aww.
But no, it's been crazy to see all the footage coming out from knocked out tanks to destroyed convoys to aircraft action and tanks bombarding positions and trucks getting refueled and then getting fired upon, and the Russian citizens, the Ukrainian citizens, both, they're just trying to go about their lives while this war goes on. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And I'm sitting here watching it from, thousands of miles away and not having to deal with it. And hopefully I will be lucky enough to not have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's the last thing we're sitting here wanting. Is like we don't want the United States.
Right.
Like, everyone,
we
I've
don't
heard a lot
want
of people
war.
complain. I've heard a lot of people
It's that
complain about how Biden isn't doing enough with the sanctions. But I'm like, what do you want him to do? He's
Right.
not gonna just go in there okay, United States, yep, all right, get
Right.
all of the troops, yep, these guys right here, just send them in there.
Like,
But
I'm not a
why?
fan-
No, just send them in there.
I don't like getting involved in American politics because of how hostile it is with people.
It
People
just
have-
sucks.
very.
It
But-
just violently sucks dick.
I don't like
It's
Biden.
awful.
I'm not a fan of Trump, right? And Trump's out here saying like, "Oh, if I was president, I would have done something." Like, yeah, no, you wouldn't, because before you left the office, you cut defensive funding to Ukraine. Before you
He
left the
also said,
office,
"I
you
admire
weakened
Putin,
NATO.
and I love Putin. Putin be cool.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's still praising Putin, while at the same time saying, "Oh, I wouldn't have let this happen." Like, shut the hell up. You would have supported Putin's invasion. Meanwhile, with Biden, I don't like that guy. And it's like, what else is he supposed to do? What else is he supposed to do that would have fixed this situation? That would have stopped Putin? What was he supposed to do? Like,
I think that's
Exactly.
funny.
appease him?
You've been saying all you've been saying all like the stuff like, oh, if Trump and you've been seeing all that over on the news lately.
Right.
But like, what the hell would Trump do? Go over and
Right.
hang out with Putin? Like,
What-
hey,
what
yeah,
would
this
Trump
is a
have
great
done?
time.
What would Trump have done that would have changed things? Because everything Trump was doing before this makes me almost believe he was doing it for Putin. He was weakening
Right.
NATO.
Yeah, yeah.
He was cutting funding to Ukraine. He was making Ukraine out to be exactly what the Russian propaganda is saying they
Weak
are.
target, yeah.
Exactly, a
Weak target that
weak
they could strike at.
Target filled with neo-Nazis and genocide and terrible people. Like, the
Right.
entire, like, slandering Ukraine was a good part of his re-election campaign.
Trump. Yeah,
why
Trump
would
might
why
wouldn't
would he have stuck
proposed, like,
his neck
restrictions.
out to support Ukraine at all? He would have just gone off with the guys like, "Oh, we're staying out of this. America doesn't need to get involved in Europe," and that's definitely a position to have. But to say that Trump would have done something to stop this from happening, name how?
You can't. You
It's
just
just
can't.
bullshit.
Right.
Like personally, I
We
think
either
that, like, we
if
should be
Trump was president when this happened, we'd either get what we have now, or something worse, or
probably
Russia
nothing
or
at all.
America just does nothing. Those are the only three options. Either we have what we have now with America implementing sanctions and working with other nations to try to bolster up Eastern Europe and stop any possible Russian expansionism, which, whether or not your opinion is that America should do that or not, you have a right to that opinion, and I think isolationism is, is a good thing, but that's what we're doing right now, and that's what's happening right now. Do I agree with it or
Right.
not?
Yeah,
I'm indifferent right now because this is a bigger issue. That is what's
Right.
going on right now. Trump
Yeah.
either
I mean,
would have gone
look,
isolationism, have status quo with what's going on right now, or fully support Russia.
I was about to say, hell, Trump probably would have invaded with him.
Or
Yeah,
well,
let's do this.
no, he wouldn't have done that. But he would have been
Yeah.
he would have been pressuring European nations to not put sanctions, or he would have made stuff even worse, and we'd be involved in conflict right now with Russia. Those are the
It's
only
like,
things that I
oh,
can
you-
really see.
Yeah.
That's it.
Like,
I don't see a better outcome if he's president. I think that this is between both of those pieces of garbage, incompetent people. I think that this is the best outcome we could have had. Could we have had someone better in office? Yes. Who would have handled it a bit better?
absolutely.
Yes.
absolutely,
Did
yeah.
we get that? No. We got someone who doesn't know how to handle international politics. And it's not even something where this crisis starting would have been handled differently. We needed someone in office who could have avoided this crisis from the outset.
Right. I've heard a lot of people say that, like, oh, Putin did this because he sees the United States as weak and a weak power. I'm like, no, he's been planning. Like,
No,
you can
it's
tell
not that.
this has been planned for a while, like ever since the Trump administration. He was gonna do this
Well,
regardless.
the invasion itself hasn't been. The invasion
you know what I
itself
mean,
has not been, but the threat of
This has been like
with the
in
Donetsk
his mind. You can tell because they've been weakening Ukraine for a while now. Like since the Trump administration's been doing this as well. Like this wasn't a thing like out of the blue, like oh let's just go invade Ukraine now. Like that just wasn't what that's not what they're playing. They were always weakening Ukraine because that's what I'm guessing. Probably was that Putin's goal was that he's like okay eventually I'm gonna want to take Ukraine. Eventually when I don't know.
Well,
but let's just start
this
making
is the
them
thing,
weaker
is
now.
that
while
the
we can.
invasion of Ukraine, as it stands, as it has happened in the past few days, has not been planned. It has been thrown together
you can tell it's
hastily
very
as fuck,
poorly
incredibly
coordinated, yeah.
hastily. So, like, he's had the option sitting on the table, but within this Russian system of international relations or whatever, everybody has come out and said that this was not what they expected. They thought this was all going to end up just being a bluff, and then Putin has painted himself in the corner, somewhere up there in the fucking oligarchy. Somebody's made the decision. Okay, actually, we're going to follow through on this now.
Yeah.
But this crisis has been planned by Russia for a while.
Yeah,
It's been one of those things that's been in the works.
Right, like you can tell, this was gonna happen at some point with the state, like with just what was happening in Ukraine, how it was getting weaker and weaker instead of stronger to face them.
Ukraine has been at war with Russia for 8 years now.
Yeah. No, this is not new. This is not a new war. This is simply a continuation of what already existed.
Right.
An expansion of an existing war.
Now, what's interesting is like, okay, so sure, so let's go with the idea that Putin doesn't invade if Trump was president, and here's why: because Ukraine gets gifted to Russia, because Ukraine feels like they don't have enough support and they give in to the demands, and now we have a Ukraine owned by Russia. That's not a better option. That's not a better outcome.
No.
War sucks, but giving Ukraine to the boot of Russia doesn't work either. There is nothing that Trump would have done. If Trump was someone who would have stopped Russia, he would not have cut defensive funding to Ukraine. He would not have weakened NATO. He would not have tried to pull America out of the UN. He would not have done these things. He would not have done things that only strengthened Russia. He would not have tried to.
The thing is that Trump was a president who refused to uphold the standards of the rules-based order of international relations.
He felt like what he was doing with this whole American first policy, and again, you can be pro isolationist, and I am on the side of isolationism. I think that's a good idea. I think that right now we can't just go full isolationist without completely destroying other people's lives, and that's not morally right. Okay, Ethan. So he's not afraid to be aggressive diplomatically, but here's the problem. That's exactly what the problem entails. If Trump's aggressive diplomatically, why the heck is he weakening NATO, weakening the UN, weakening these things that would have defended Ukraine, which then put America in a position to where suddenly they can't actively take the steps necessary to properly defend them, and then. Like, if you're going to say Trump's going to be aggressive against Russia, what else could he have done that would have changed Putin's mind without making it even worse than what it currently is? or gifting Ukraine
Right.
to Putin. Like, there's nothing he would have done. He would have done something similar with the economic sanctions. I know that's exactly what he would have done because that's what he tried to do with North Korea. That's what he did with China. And guess what? Guess what? China didn't stop threatening Taiwan. China didn't stop threatening secondary powers, which was kind of the reason why we started sanctioning China. North Korea didn't stop what they were doing. Like, it doesn't work. It doesn't work
And the
to stop
China
these
thing's a very
nations.
long-running issue.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So we're gonna go off and say that
this goes into before Clinton, like this
Like-
sort of shit.
there's nothing that he could have done that would have changed it with the personality he had. Now, if he had
Yeah,
bolstered
but
Ukraine,
this is
now if he had
fuck,
bolstered NATO, if he had taken the steps of, hey, Russia's being a little bit more aggressive, let's bolster Ukraine, let's bolster NATO, Russia wouldn't have taken the steps to go, hey, NATO's in a weaker state, Ukraine's in a weaker state, let's advance on this. Again, Trump created this situation, and these people saying, oh yeah, well he could fix it. Well, let's not forget that Trump created this.
Yeah.
You can go off and say and argue that maybe he could fix it, which, first of all, not a good argument. But he also created what we currently have. And sure, you could go off and argue that, well, a lot of this was also thanks to Obama having a lot of inaction against Ukraine. And yeah, Obama thought that Russia
Well, that
was
doesn't
not
help.
a threat, and that politics that were anti-Russia were stuck in, the rhetoric of the 80s. Which, with hindsight, kind of makes sense, but not after 2000, not after he got reelected with how Russia acted. So it's a complicated situation, and there just haven't been good U.S. presidents that have been able to handle the international stage. We haven't had a president who could operate on the international stage since the 90s, and
Yeah,
that's
And
created
this-
a problem
this
where
is
the
the
United
thing,
States has
looking at it
lost
from,
legitimacy.
From my perspective, like, yes, I am a Marxist. That's the whole thing. But basically, United States policy has remained consistent since before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Nothing has really changed. There's a very, very clear line of where the U.S. foreign policy is going and has been. And basically, the only difference between Trump, for example, is Trump says the quiet part loud. Biden tries to go back on that by saying the
Right.
quiet part quiet. But the policy itself hasn't changed. Obama was doing the same things as Biden is doing.
Exactly.
And fucking HW was doing the same fucking things that wait, no.
There are slight
whatever,
differences
fucking Iraq
between
Bush.
how they handle things.
Yeah,
Biden
But
is definitely
there's
more
superficial
engaged.
Differences.
Biden is definitely more
There's
engaged on the
superficial
international
differences
scale.
compared to
But
the line,
Yeah.
the main
right,
the main line of American foreign policy. The main line of American foreign policy is consistent and has not changed, aside from differences in presentation or superficial sort of language.
well,
Around
here's the problem. American policy has been the same since the end of World War II. It's always been this American
Yes,
first
I
policy
wasn't going to go back that far, but yeah.
it's always been this policy of America first, set up a stage where America basically controls the world. All world politics go through America. All world trade goes through America. There was actually a convention held after the end of World War II where some really rich people who were also politicians realized that America owned 50% of the world's wealth, while at the time having about 5% of the world's population, if not less. So they realized, holy crap, we're in a very interesting position. And ever since then, American policy has always been American first. How that goal is achieved has been different from president to president, but it's been instilled in the idea of the operations internationally are to secure American hegemony over the rest of the world and American influence in different nations. And the nations that threaten that are then made out to be the state enemies. Sometimes they're legitimate, such as Russia invading Ukraine, upsetting the balance of Europe and upsetting the balance of how we interact as nations.
Well,
Sometimes they're not
international
legitimate,
system, yeah.
like Vietnam or Iran,
Yeah.
So there's these different. It's a very big balancing game, and we're seeing America as this world power start to slip. That's what we've been going through for the past 10, 12 years.
That's what we're seeing with George Bush and Trump, for example, is the ones that start saying the quiet part loud. Is because the U.S. is starting to lose its grip.
Right.
It's an empire in decline.
And the problem is you have people like Trump who think that the way that America can get back on this international scale and be powerful is to not engage. Oh, get out of the Paris
Or
Agreement.
to very violently engage.
Right. Like, it's the idea that America getting involved in these things means America is getting taken advantage of. Like, the whole point is that nations need to rely on America
is
for
the one to
America
take
to
advantage.
have power. That's why America set itself up as the leader of these things. That's why America set itself up as such a high status member, because America knows that it's going to sacrifice some of its wealth to have control, to have influence. Unfortunately for America, there's no big boogeyman called the Soviet Union for people to run to America for. And we've had presidents and people in power who think that we can still retain this control while not giving anybody money.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's not true.
And
Biden understands
America
that
is rapidly losing its soft power capabilities as well,
right.
as the result of American policy. Like,
Biden understands
America's
that for America to have
wins
this control,
in the 80s, 90s,
Right.
early 2000s, but now, 20, 30 years later, America is reaping the whirlwind of, radical Islamists and
Yep.
fucking
and
the Russians.
America's
going
losing
in,
support.
The USSR's collapse and
When
stuff.
the world
And just
rallied
everybody
around,
is turning against America.
when the world rallied around America after 9/11, and America abused that sympathy, that put America on a path that it has not recovered from and will not recover from. No one trusts the
Yeah.
United
No.
States anymore. No one looks to the United States as an actual peacekeeping nation or a nation that fights for democracy. Trump made that worse. Obama did not help. Bush was just an idiot, and Biden is not helping things either. Like, I think that this whole crisis right now is helping Biden more than anything helped anybody else. But Biden's handling of Afghanistan was atrocious, and
Terrible.
like, even if he handles this situation as best he can, which I don't think he will, and there's already people unhappy with the way that it's gone, it's not going to fix
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
amount of damage that Biden has already done before he was even in office a year. Trump just ostracized
Yeah.
everybody and made everybody less willing to work with America. Biden's
I
not
think
helping.
the thing is, we say everybody, but we're only really talking about in the Western world.
Right.
Like, in the last 30 years, the Western world has started to turn against America, whereas most of the rest of the world already was against America.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to
It's
see.
strategically, traditional allies are starting to look at America and go, "Why are we still working with you the same way that we were?"
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, but I'm going to end it with just sort of this. There's an old phrase that was usually used by people when referencing, the great empire collapses, where we like to read in history books thinking, how could people not see this coming? It's so obvious, just can't they see the signs? Let's not fall for that trap now. Let's not fall for the trap of falling into things without seeing it coming. Keep your head on a swivel. To the people listening, stay alert, be aware, look for the signs.
Read book.
This is where understanding history and understanding the context and understanding how history rhymes is extremely important. So,
I love that phrase, history rhymes.
it's important to know, and it's important to keep your head on a swivel. Don't fall for the trap of looking back on this 20 years later going, how did we not see this? Be the person to be aware and at least take the risk of being wrong to call something out if you think something's happening. Don't be a worrywart and call out any little thing and being like, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, oh, it's this, like some tinfoil hatter. But it's important to observe, don't obsess, calculate, and understand. And read
Don't forget to
historical
check your
contexts and take the appropriate actions without being too drastic. Make sure that you set yourself up and the people that you care about up for success, so that you don't be one of the people who was blindsided by something that people 20 years from now will wonder how the hell anybody was blindsided by it. So hopefully we'll do another stream like this soon. It'll probably be next week sometime.
Yep.
So I'll catch you guys later. I appreciate all the support. You guys stay safe.
I do have one closer. I've got
All
one
right.
thing to add.